Welcome back to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. Today is Tuesday, April 30th, 2024. We are a little bit closer to halfway through the cycle of the moon. It's starting to come up later in the night. Looks like it'll be up a little after 1 a.m. tonight, so everybody can get their gear out for a few hours at least before it comes up and ruins everything for us one-shot color people. I was listening back to some of the older episodes this week, and it's funny. I realized one thing I said early on was a little bit improper, and that I said it was kind of pointless to go out and image during, moonlit hours, because if you are indeed doing mono imaging, you can go out whenever the moon is as bright as it can be, and you won't have any trouble as long as you're doing, mono narrowband imaging. Lots of people thoroughly enjoy doing that. And even with a one-shot color camera, you can enjoy narrowband imaging, which is something that I have actually recently taken up. So I actually had a narrowband filter before, but it was kind of a less expensive SV Bony one that kind of gave me a little bit of a taste for what you could do with narrowband imaging. But recently I was able to acquire an L Extreme F2 narrowband filter, which is a very nice one. And narrowband means to pick up a very narrow band of light, as the name implies. And if we're able to separate that very narrow wavelength of light from all the other light sources, we can block out the moonlight essentially and prevent it from ruining our shots. So if you're doing mono imaging in particular, you're able to pick up on, nebulous regions such as hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3 and all of the, really beautiful nebulous regions that we like to acquire. And it doesn't really particularly matter if the moon is out bothering you, so you can kind of image all month long. But with that being said, the moon is about halfway through its cycle, so we are drawing ever nearer to new moon, which is always a good time. The countdown is still going for my dark sky trip. I am about 41 days away at this point, so keep your fingers crossed that we get great weather. I certainly hope we will. We're going to be in a Bortle 1 site, low altitude, but Bortle 1, been there before, and it is gorgeous. Absolutely incredible views of the Milky Way out there, and I just can't wait to get back and see it. It's been on my mind a lot lately, and I can't wait to get back out there. So as we left off last week, we were talking about PixInsight, which is a really awesome program that many of us astrophotographers use for processing our images. And, I forgot to mention, this is actually the same tool that NASA uses for processing its images. So if you've ever seen photos from the Hubble Space Telescope or the James Webb Space Telescope, those images are also processed in PixInsight. So if you've ever asked yourself, what is the best possible way to process an astronomy image, look no further than PixInsight. If NASA uses it, I would imagine that it's good enough for you or I. I left you guys with some data that I was able to collect from my wide field rig of the Horsehead Nebula and Flame Nebula, as well as M42. And if you need a link to it, I will drop that in the show notes, just like I did last week. That link also includes icons, which is something that we're going to talk about today. We didn't really get into it last week just because we weren't quite there yet. And as far as the tutorial that we're going to talk about, but we are going to talk about those icons today, so feel free to grab that out of the link as well. It's going to be a Google Drive link, and basically within that folder, you're going to find darks, flats, and lights. And I'm kind of keeping it simple for this tutorial, just because I know a lot of people that might be joining along, this could be their, first time using PixInsight. And like I say, if you do not have the program yet, and you're just tuning into this week's episode, please feel free to go back and listen to last week's episode first. And if you have never used PixInsight, you can request a free 30-day license from them. Just go to their website. If you Google PixInsight, it'll come right up for you, and you can request that free license and follow along with me while I work on processing those images. So please feel free to join us. So when we left off, though, we had basically gone through the weighted batch pre-processing tool, which is a really great tool for stacking our images and combining them together. So basically, you're able to take all of your calibration frames, which are your dark frames, your flat frames, your bias frames, your flat darks, your dark flats, and all of those types of calibration frames, and combine them with your light frames to get one stacked image, which you can then process. And when we were done with that, we used the spectrophotogenic color correction tool, SPCC for short, to correct the color. Which is something that a lot of cameras need to do because of their pixel pattern or Bayer matrix. This is a tool that is something that pretty much everybody uses within PixInsight. And the reason that we have to do that is because the way the pixel pattern on most cameras are set up is in such a way that they generally are going to have like red, green, green, blue. So if you have one pixel, it's going to have, 4 sections to the pixel. If it's a square, one will be red, 2 will be green, and 1 will be blue. And then when we go to actually look at that image, it could be too much green if it's automatically bringing out all of the colors at the same level, and you need to even that out essentially. And that's what SPCC can do for you. I'm putting that very simply, but in layman's terms, that's essentially what it does. So it'll automatically correct that for you. And it's a great tool for doing that. So SPCC is what we did. And then when we were done with that, we used the STF auto stretch tool. And what that does is it basically does an automatic stretch of your image when it's in its linear state. Linear meaning it hasn't been stretched at all, meaning none of the colors have been brought out essentially of your image, but it gives you kind of a preview essentially of what it can look like before you actually go through the process of stretching the image. Now, when I actually do stretch my image, which is a few steps from where we actually are now, I've got a pretty simple way that I do it. And then I go through and kind of manually tweak it with the histogram and the curves tool, which is something that we'll talk about a little bit later. And you'll probably, hopefully, end up doing something very similar. Luckily for us, a lot of very smart people that are much smarter than me have developed some really great tools and scripts within PixInsight that make the process of stretching very easy. So we don't have to manually get into the curves or the histogram and slowly stretch it one little bit at a time over and over again, kind of like people used to have to do with Photoshop. If you ever watched any of the older videos that Trevor from Astro Backyard put up, he would often show you how to manually stretch a photo in Photoshop. And while that is great knowledge to have, luckily we don't have to really do that in PixInsight because we have tools that can automate that process for us, which is wonderful. One of the main tools and toolboxes, if you will, that I use on a very regular basis within PixInsight is called the Easy Processing Suite. And the way that we add this into PixInsight is by updating what's called our repositories. And essentially what you'll need to do is manually go into PixInsight, and I can actually walk you through it, and I will add in the show notes exactly the website that needs to be added. But essentially what you're going to do at the top of PixInsight, you will see an area that is denoted as resources at the very top. and then you're just going to scroll down to updates, and then you're going to click on manage repositories. From there, you just need to click the add button, and then there is a website that you'll need to add, and I'm going to add that website and a couple others into the show notes. And this is for the Easy Processing Suite again, which has a lot of the tools that we're going to want to use. There's also another tool that we're going to talk about called Graxpert that you're going to want to go ahead and add into your repositories as well. Graxpert does a lot of great things, and it also recently added in an excellent noise exterminator tool. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a little while because I have been doing some testing with it against the noise exterminator tool from RC Astro. I may have said noise exterminator referring to Graxperts, but basically a noise removal tool versus noise exterminator from RC Astro, which is a paid tool that you have to purchase from them. And I will talk about the pros and cons of both of those a little bit later when we get into the RC Astro plugins. But you will want to go ahead and add that in. There's a few different plugins that you need to do this way for, add on manually to your repositories. And I will go ahead and include those in the show notes. So like I say, just go up to resources, manage repositories, click on add, and then let's go ahead and add in those websites and then press OK. Now, after you've done that, you're going to want to go back to resources up top, scroll down to updates, and then you're just going to click on check for updates. And it should then find some updates because you added those repositories, and it's going to ask you if you want to go ahead and install them. Click on yes. And then it's going to tell you that you'll need to restart PixInsight for the updates to take hold. Go ahead and close out of PixInsight. When you open it back up, it may prompt you to go ahead and install the plugins. Go ahead and click on yes. It'll take just a moment for those to go ahead and finish installing. And when everything is all done, you should be able to go up top and you'll have, again, all your options, but you're going to want to go to script. And then when you scroll down, you should be able to see one now called Easy Processing Suite. And that is what we want to verify is there to start. Now, the other feature that we want to add in is called the Toolbox, and that is the other website that I've included in the show notes. And you'll just want to follow the exact same process as far as adding that to your repositories, clicking check for updates, and then restarting PixInsight and allowing it to install the plugins. And after that is done, again, click on script. And when you scroll down, you should now have an option for Toolbox. And the final thing that you're going to want to do is install Graxpert. Now, to get the script, you should have already done it, but if you added all of the websites to your repositories, the iDeviceApps.de/PixInsight/utilities is the one in particular that has the script for Graxpert, but you do actually still need to go download and install the .exe application. I will go ahead and link you to the Graxpert website, and you can install it for whichever platform you're using. It works for Windows, Mac, or Linux, so they're available on all platforms. I have Windows. It's a pretty simple process. You download it, you install it to the same program files drive that you have PixInsight installed on. So if it's on your C drive, it's going to go to C drive, app data local, PixInsight, etc. Just let it install to the default folder and PixInsight will find it. Afterwards, once you have that fully installed, you may need to go back into the updates section of PixInsight and just hit check for updates again. And then it should show up under Toolbox. You should have an option for Graxpert there. And then once you have that done, that should be pretty much all of the tools that we're going to need for today. And the next thing we want to do is get all of our icons on the desktop. So these icons are something that I use all the time in PixInsight. I really find them to be one of the biggest time savers. Before, when I was having to manually go into all of the submenus and individually find everything, it was such a huge time sink. So I would definitely encourage you to use them as well. If you go into the Google Drive, you should find a folder that says icons, and then you'll find a file that says My 2024 Icons. And it should be as simple as dragging and dropping that onto the desktop within PixInsight. And I just mean the gray background area. So if you drag and drop that right onto that gray background area, it should go ahead and load up several icons in the top right-hand corner of PixInsight. There is one of them that we're going to need to update. But that is a good thing. We want to update it because I wanted to show you guys how you can add your own icons if you would like to. And then you will probably notice a few. You may or may not see the names for them, but the first three on the left-hand side are going to be for Blur Exterminator, Noise Exterminator, and Star Exterminator. And if you do not yet own those plugins, you might not even see the name for them. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to work. But if you do see the name for them, they're probably not going to work because, again, you might not own those plugins yet. So you don't need to worry about those. If you want, if they're, getting in your way or what have you, feel free to delete them. You can just highlight them and then, delete them if you'd like to. But for now, I would like to just go over on the right-hand side what all of these icons are and what they can do for you. And some of them, actually, I probably need to go through and update my icon set again because some of these tools have been updated and I'm not really using a whole lot of a couple of these now that I'm looking at this list. And maybe we can kind of go through and update these together so you can get used to creating icons and kind of get a feel for what I'm talking about. Okay, so you sharp-eyed listeners might first notice the second icon on the right-hand side says PCC. And if you remember from the last episode, I said that we no longer use the PCC tool because SPCC is the preferred method by us astrophotographers that use PixInsight now. So let's go ahead and get rid of that PCC tool. So what I'm going to have you do is right click on the PCC icon, and then you're going to see an option that says Delete Photometric Color Calibration Icon. Go ahead and click on that. And you might actually see a second one behind it. I'm kind of looking now and it looks like I had a stack of them, and you might get to where it says SPCC behind it. I think I may have stacked them up inadvertently. If you don't see SPCC behind it, this is a great opportunity for me to show you how to go ahead and make your own icon. And I'm going to do that with the SPCC tool because that's one that we're going to use all the time. And it's, a perfect example. So let's go ahead and do that now. From the very top, I want you to go up to Process and select All Processes. And then I want you to find the Spectrophotometric Color Calibration. It's in the middle, all the way down. While I'm using a 4K display, it might vary depending on what your output is and your screen size, but look for Spectrophotometric Color Calibration and then go ahead and click on that. And you will see a box open with a whole bunch of options. But in this case, what we want to do is find the triangle in the bottom left-hand corner. And if you hover your mouse over it, you will see that it says New Instance. What I want you to do is click and drag that triangle onto the gray desktop area, just kind of like where all the icons are, but drag it into an empty area. And what you'll notice is it now has its own icon and it'll say process with a number beside it. So now you have your own icon for SPCC, and you can do that with any of these processes. So if you find yourself using a particular process a lot and you want to have quick access to it, it's as easy as dragging that triangle onto the desktop. And then you can even rename it. So, you don't know what process 72 is, for example. You can just go ahead and right click on the icon. And then about halfway down, you will see Set Icon Identifier. And you'll see the current identifier and then new identifier. And you can go ahead and rename this one to SPCC. My apologies if you hear my dog barking in the background. Apparently he wants to guest host this week, but I told him he needs to schedule that with my agent if he wants to be on the show. So we set the icon up with SPCC, but again, you can do that with any of the processes in PixInsight. It's an excellent tool to have, or excellent arrow to have in your quiver, if you will. I use it all the time. That's how I got all these icons set up. Well, I take that back. I took all these icons from Luca Matico's tutorial, but I am able to customize it now and add them as I see fit. So, like Graxpert and all the exterminator tools, I've added those over time as needed. And then a few mask tools I've added over time as well. So I just kind of customize it as I see fit. And you can do the same. So anything that you want to add, go ahead and add it. And then anything that you feel like you don't need, feel free to remove it. All right, so let's get back to our data. So where we were is we had the linear. And when I say linear, that means non-stretched version of our image. And we had done the auto stretch, which was that nuclear looking button in the top right-hand corner. And if you want, you can go ahead and press the little reset button to the left of that. If you look directly to the left of the nuclear button, you should see a symbol that looks like two monitors with an X, and that'll reset it. And you can toggle back and forth between those two to auto stretch and then reset it. And if you are still getting green in your image, again, run that SPCC tool, and that will go ahead and remove the green. I actually do have the green, so I am going to go ahead and open up SPCC, and then I am going to press F5 or the square at the bottom to go ahead and apply that, and that will pretty quickly go through and remove the green. And after that is done, what we want to do is deal with the gradient in this image. So gradients are something that is extremely common in astrophotography. So unless you are in a moonless sky that is in a very, very dark location, chances are you're going to have a gradient of some sort to deal with. Luckily for us, there are some very excellent tools these days for dealing with gradients. Not too long ago, the best ways of dealing with gradients were the two icons that you see directly below SPCC. That is ABE, which is automatic background extraction, and DBE, which is dynamic background extraction. But truth be told, I don't use those two very often anymore. I really like what Graxpert has done with their background extraction tool, particularly since they've had the AI update to their tool over the last year. It is excellent at removing gradients. So we walked through earlier in the podcast and installed Graxpert. Hopefully you were able to get that done. If you go up to script and then toolbox, you should see an option for Graxpert. So what I'll have you do is go ahead and click on Graxpert, and it's going to bring up a small window that says Graxpert script, and you may or may not have the icon for Graxpert yet. If you don't, I would recommend you go ahead and create an icon for it, because this is something that you will use quite frequently. Again, you can just drag that triangle over to your desktop, and then if you get a process number, just right click on it and hit set icon identifier and rename it to Graxpert. So from there, we want to select the correct image. By default, it should have whatever image you were looking at last selected. We should only have the one image up right now, which is our main M42 image that's unstretched. So what we're going to do is go ahead and leave correction on subtraction, which is the default. And then we'll also have replace target view. Actually, let's do this. Let's back up for 1 second. Go ahead and X out of that. And I want to show you one thing before we do this. It's a really cool thing that I do all the time in PixInsight. And it's a good way to be non-destructive with our workflow. So in your picture, you will notice on the left-hand side, you'll see the name of the photo kind of going upwards. Like I say, on the left-hand side, you'll see master light bin 1 4144 by 2822, and it is actually going up the left-hand side of the photo. And you'll get a little arrow if you click on it, and you can drag that over and then let go, and it'll make a copy of the photo. So what you can do is click, drag, and let go, and then you will have two of the exact photo. You see that? And anytime that I'm going to be doing something that is going to make a big difference to one of my photos that I'm working on, sometimes I will go through and make a copy of it. So that way, if I mess something up royally, I can always have the other photo to go back to. So let's go ahead and do that. And that way we can kind of have a real time before and after before we apply Graxpert. So go ahead and again, on the left-hand side of your photo where it says Master Light Bin 1 and you got the little green highlight section, click that and drag it over and it'll give you another copy of the photo once you release it. And then we're going to go up to Script, scroll down to Toolbox and select Graxpert. And then just leave all the defaults alone and go ahead and click on that green check mark. And you should start seeing a few processes running in the background. It'll say starting Graxpert. Hopefully you don't get any errors. If you do get any errors, you can Google the specific error that you got. They have a very, very good community for fixing issues. And hopefully they'll be able to fix it pretty quickly for you. But it doesn't take too long to run Graxpert, and you should pretty quickly see a very, very big difference between the old photo and the new photo. And what you're going to notice is that all the gradient is pretty much gone. And now we have a much more even looking background. Now, I will say this is not the best data in the world if you're using the M42 data that I've provided. This is, this was me kind of playing around before my real target was up in the air one night. I'm not trying to win any awards with this. This is just an example. So don't judge me too harshly if you were using this data. This is, just a stack from one night that I was messing around. It was already low on the horizon. So in any case, I'm not going to sit here and defend myself. But anyway, so after Graxpert has ran, you should get a auto stretched preview of what everything is looking like. And it should look pretty good. And in fact, if you go up top and you click on the reset screen transfer function again, the two monitors with the little red X just to the left of the nuclear looking symbol, it'll send it back to its linear state and then perform another auto stretch. And then you'll notice the image actually looks even better now, because it's auto stretched with the gradient removed. So the colors will look a lot better and it won't look so washed out. Much better look to it. So that is essentially what is going to be able to, in most cases, replace automatic and dynamic background extraction. Now, there is a lot of debate as to whether or not Graxpert is as good as dynamic background extractor in some cases. I know a lot of people will tell you they like to go through and manually select which points they want to remove using dynamic background extraction. Truth be told, though, me personally, I haven't found too many instances where I was not happy with the results that Graxpert provided. If you are not happy with the results that Graxpert provides, you can certainly go into dynamic background extractor and play around with it. It basically lets you select different areas. What you want to do is drag and drop X's basically on your image where there is no stars and no nebulosity. So wherever there's dark sky, essentially, and then run the tool, and you want to put, a lot of different points of light on there. And I'm not going to get too deep into how to use that tool because that's not what I'm teaching today. I'm teaching how to use Graxpert. But if you ever want to check it out, there's a million videos online that'll teach you how to use the dynamic background extraction tool. But I like Graxpert because it's quick and it works well and it does what I think is an excellent job. So once we're done with that, there are a few different things that I like to do. Now, the first thing that I would do after running Graxpert is actually use one of the paid plugins, which is Blur Exterminator. Blur Exterminator is an awesome plugin. And out of the 3 plugins that I own from RC Astro, which are Blur Exterminator, Noise Exterminator, and Star Exterminator, I would suggest purchasing Blur Exterminator before any of the others. It is by far the one that will get you the best results with your images. If you have streaky stars, it can fix them. I would, highly encourage you not to have streaky stars, but it's incredible what this tool can do to sharpen up your photos. So Blur Exterminator, again, it's something that I generally run at this point in my imaging process. Now, whether or not you own that particular plugin at this point, you probably don't if you're brand new to PixInsight. I am not saying that you should run out and buy it, but look into it. I believe they do offer a free trial with Blur Exterminator. Let me go check. Okay, so Blur Exterminator does indeed offer a free trial, so you can definitely check it out for free. If you go to their website, it's rc-astro.com. You can check that out. It's $99.95. I believe it is their priciest plugin. Technically, it's a deconvolution tool, and it is AI powered. So it's using AI in the background in order to process the image and make it look significantly better. And it does a wonderful job cleaning up images. So highly recommend and encourage anyone who is serious about their astrophotography to look into Blur Exterminator. If you have incredibly clean data, you might not need to worry about it, but I would think the vast majority of us could improve to some degree with our equipment, and Blur Exterminator will give you that extra little bit of edge. So this is when I run Blur Exterminator. So after we are done running that, you should get a fairly sharpened up image, which generally will include slightly smaller stars. If your stars are slightly saturated, Blur Exterminator will generally shrink them down a little bit for you, which is something that I notice. But at this point, we have a couple of options, and it kind of depends on which way we want to go with our image. If we like the way that our stars look and we're pretty happy overall with the image as far as how the auto stretch looks, etc., and overall we're happy with how it looks, then we could go ahead and do an auto stretch on the image here. And when I say auto stretch, I mean use the easy processing suite and let it perform the stretch. But I don't really like to do that. What I like to do is separate the stars from the image, and then I like to go through and stretch the nebulosity separately from the stars. Because what you'll find happens is if you stretch your nebulosity and your stars together, your stars will get oversaturated and they won't look natural if you stretch them too much. And you can end up with a really ugly image really fast. So in order to separate your stars from your nebulosity or your nebula or your galaxy or whatever you're imaging, you're going to need one of the star tools that are available. I am using Star Exterminator these days, but for a long time I used Starnet 2, and it is a very good tool that is free. And it's, easy to install, easy to set up. I'm not going to go through the exact process of how to set up Starnet 2 because it's a little bit cumbersome. But I will link you to a tutorial that will show you exactly how to set up Starnet 2 step by step. And the reason I'm not going to go through it is just because it involves moving files into specific folders and specific file names, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that would be very tedious to listen to. And I just feel like, knowing the type of learner that I am, I would have a hard time following along with that. So let me just link you guys to exactly how to install Starnet 2. If you want to go ahead and pause, you can go into the show notes and get that installed and then jump back in and join us. If you need to restart PixInsight for the install, now would be an excellent time to hit save as. go up to File and Save your project. You can just hit File, Save Project, and then you can name the project whatever you'd like, and that will save everything exactly as it stands right now in PixInsight. So that way, when you come back in, you can just reopen everything exactly where it was, icons and everything, and pick right back up where we left off. All right, so we've got Starnet 2 installed, hopefully, and we are ready to separate our stars from our nebula. But first thing we want to do is do a little bit of an auto stretch. Some people might disagree with me on this step, but I like to do the easy soft stretch before I separate everything. And the reason for that is I feel that it gives a very good natural color to the stars, and then I can separate the stars and then work on the nebulosity as I see fit. And it gives me a very good baseline to kind of start with for the nebulosity. And then I can, pump up the contrast or bring out the reds or the blues or what have you as much as I want to separately from the stars, however I see fit. So what we're going to do first is go ahead and select Script, and then we're going to go down to Easy Processing Suite and select Easy Soft Stretch. And it'll take just a moment to load the tool up, and it should give you a little bit of a preview of what this soft stretch is going to look like. And it should bring your histogram about a fifth of the way out. And hopefully it'll give you somewhat even red, green, blue. Green's usually a little bit higher. But go ahead and kind of leave everything at its default for this case. Sometimes you need to go in there and expand it a little bit or shrink it a little bit, and you can get into all those details a little bit later when you get more comfortable with the tool. But for now, let's just leave it at its defaults and go ahead and click on Run Easy Soft Stretch at the bottom. All right, after that is done, you should have a soft stretched image. This is a great starting point for us. So we no longer have a linear image. This is nonlinear, so it is in a stretched state. And this is the perfect place to separate the stars from the image so we can begin tweaking that nebulosity a bit as we see fit to do so. And what we're going to do is go ahead and make a clone of the image so we can separate those stars as we see fit. Now, since we have the icons that I provided at the very bottom, you should see something that says Clone for Starless. And what I want you to do is go ahead and drag and drop that on top of your image file, the one that we just did the stretch on, and it should give you a new image that is named Starless. And now is when we're going to go ahead and use Starnet 2. So if you got it installed earlier, you should be able to go under Process and then All Processes and scroll down and select Starnet 2. And you'll get a small box to appear. This would be an excellent time to go ahead and drag that triangle over to your icons and drop an icon for Starnet 2 and then rename it to Starnet 2, because this is one that you'll be using frequently unless you decide to purchase Star Exterminator at some point like I did. This is probably the last one that I would purchase because Starnet 2 does an excellent job of removing stars. And honestly, it's quite debatable if you really do need to purchase a separate tool for star removal. I did end up buying it just because I had the whole suite of RC Astro tools. So I figured why not? But that's up for debate. So what you're going to want to do though, is go ahead and check the box that says create star mask and uncheck the box that says linear data, because remember, this is not linear data anymore. We have applied an auto stretch. And then I want you to select the photo that says starless. So we did the drag and drop earlier onto the original image that said clone for starless, and it brought up a new image that is named starless. So select that image that says starless, and then I want you to click on Starnet 2, and all you need to have checked again is create star mask. Nothing else should be checked. And then I want you to go ahead and click apply. And it'll take just a few moments, and it'll kind of go ahead and run its process in the background. Depending on your computer, it might take 3 minutes. It might take 10 minutes. Go grab a drink and come right back. All right, so after Starnet is done doing its thing, you should now have 3 images. we're going to have our original image. We are going to now have a starless image that should show a lot of beautiful nebulosity and clouds around the Orion Nebula and the Horsehead and Flame Nebula, if you're using my data set. And then you will also have a really cool star mask image that is going to be all of the separated stars that have been pulled off of the starless image. And the beauty of this is now we can go through and tweak the nebulosity on the starless image without impacting our stars. And when we are done tweaking the nebulosity and getting it just how we like it, then we can go back and layer the stars back on top of the nebulosity without having to interfere with them. Also, if we want to, we can saturate the stars a little bit more, perhaps, if we, want to make them a little bit more colorful, which is something that I sometimes like to do depending on, how they look. I could, open up the curves tool and then go over to saturation and then just pump up that saturation just a little bit. You don't want to go overboard, obviously, but, if your stars are a little bit bland and you want to have a little bit more color to them, that is something that you could certainly do. But the main reason here is so you can go ahead and tweak your nebulosity, which is what we're going to do now. So if you find that you need a little bit more room on your desktop at this point, this is an excellent time to check out how you can minimize these photos and then bring them up later. So one of the great things about PixInsight is when you minimize a photo, you can then drag it anywhere you want on the desktop in PixInsight, and it just leaves it there. And then you can go and double click on it and bring it right back up whenever you're ready to. So let's go ahead and minimize the original photo and the star mask photo and get those out of the way. And let's just have the starless photo up in front of us for now. And I want to show you how the curves tool works next. So on the right-hand side of the image, about halfway down our list of icons, you're going to see a few different things. You'll see curves and histogram. It'll say hist and curves. Let's go ahead and open up histogram first. And by default, there's not going to be a view selected. So you'll want to click the little drop down menu and you're going to want to select your starless image. And it should bring up a histogram at that point that will allow you to see the colors going up. And one thing you might notice right off the bat here is that there is more green than red and blue. And if that is the case, you can certainly correct that. There is actually a tool called SCNR that is directly above the histogram tool. And if you double click on that, by default, the first color to remove is green because by default in the Bayer matrix, green is the most typical color that always shows up more. You could open that up and then just hit apply once and it'll remove any excess green that is still in your image. But like I say, looking at this image, I don't see any excess green, so I'm not going to run it at this time. But all that being said, I don't see any reason to adjust the blacks any further on this image. I think our background sky is looking pretty good. But while we have the histogram open, let's go ahead and look at the real-time preview. So in the bottom left-hand corner of the histogram tool, you will see a little circle next to the triangle and the square, and that is the preview tool. And this is very important to figure out how this tool works when you're using histogram, curves, and when you get more advanced and you're using the mask tool, it comes into play quite a bit. But go ahead and click on that circle, and it's going to open up real-time histogram transformation. And then what you can do is you can actually adjust the sliders back and forth on the histogram and see how it impacts your photo. And don't worry, because this is non-destructive, so you can actually play around with it here, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. So what you're going to notice on the histogram underneath the red, green, and blue little hills that are going up that make up the histogram, you'll see, one arrow on the left, one in the middle, and then one on the right. And the way this works is the arrow on the left is your dark colors. The arrow on the far right is your absolute white, and then the arrow in the middle is your midtones. So if you grab the arrow on the far left and then drag it to the right just a little bit and let go, you'll notice the background getting darker. But you want to be really careful with this because this image has already been stretched. And for the most part, I think we're already about at the limit of as much as we want to drag that out, because any further and we'll start clipping the blacks. And what that means is we're removing data, and we never want to do that when we're processing an image, because sure, you might make it look a little bit darker in the background, but the cost is that you're actually losing nebulosity and important data, and we don't want to do that. So on the other side, if you go to that arrow on the far right and drag it a little bit to the left, you will notice things getting brighter. So if you go ahead and do that and move it over to the left, you'll see the histogram is getting a little bit wider up top, and you can kind of move that back and forth and see what I'm talking about. Now, when you're done moving those sliders back and forth, don't worry if you've messed things up or you've slid it too far to the left or right. You can very easily reset where the histogram is. If you look in the very bottom right-hand corner, you'll see 4 little arrows pointing to each other. That's actually the reset button. So anytime you press that, it'll fully reset the histogram back to its original state. And that's something very important to learn, that tool. Reset is something that you have to know how to use. So there's a lot of other stuff that you can do within this histogram tool. That is just kind of scratching the surface on it. You can go into the individual channels of red, green, and blue as well. And you can go into the alpha channel, which is something for a different episode. But for now, that is how you can use the histogram at the RGB level. So that's kind of an overview of how that works. If you were doing a actual, linear to nonlinear stretch, you would need to come in here and slowly pull that over from the left to the right to get your histogram dragged over until it was about 1/5 of the way over, essentially. So you could, get the blacks right. But we did the easy soft stretch earlier, so we really don't have to worry about that too much. So go ahead and close out of the histogram transformation tool. And I want you to go ahead and open up the curves tool, because this is actually something that we can go ahead and use on this image. And it's a really, really neat one. So you will need to close out of your real-time preview window as well. Unfortunately, that real-time preview does not transfer over. So like if you opened up a real-time preview in the histogram window and then switched over to the curves tool, that preview will not keep working for the curves tool. You'll actually have to close out of it and then open up a new preview window for the curves tool. So go ahead and close out of the real-time preview, open up the curves tool, and then open up a new preview. And you should be able to once again see a preview of your image. Now, the curves tool is where I like to spend most of my time when I'm playing with my light in PixInsight. I like to go to the middle of the curves and pull it out just a little bit to bring up all of my nebulosity a little bit. And what you'll notice, I wish I could kind of show you a photo while I do this, but you'll have to play along with it or play around with it to kind of, explore how it works. And like I say, as you do this, if you find that you've gone too far in any one direction, just click that reset button down in the lower right-hand corner, and it'll take you right back to where you were before. You can also undo any changes that you've done. So like if you do hit apply and then you're like, oh man, I didn't mean to do that, there is a way to go back. So after you hit apply, all you need to do is go back. You'll have to move your preview out of the way. Go back to your original image and right click on it, and you should get an undo curves transformation. Or you can press Control Y with the image selected, and that'll undo the change for you. So if you ever like really screw something up, just go back to your original image and right click and hit undo. And then you're good to go. So nothing to worry about there. It's very non-destructive, so you can play around with it without having to worry too terribly much about messing things up. So, what I like to do though is drop a dot right in the middle of the line and then pull it up just a little bit. So it kind of looks like a gentle curve going from the bottom up to a little bit in the middle and then back down. So almost like just a really gentle hill going up the middle. And then I'll apply that. And then depending on what the image is, I'll usually do what is called an S curve. So that means it kind of looks like an S, and it's lower at the bottom and then higher at the top. And on this particular image, that's not going to work out too well because the Orion core is going to get blown out really quick if you pull the highs out any more than they already will. Unfortunately, I did 60-second exposures at f2.8, and that is just way too much for the core of the Orion Nebula, particularly in the very dark skies that I was in. But when you're working with like regular nebula, you can play around with that and find that a ton of nebulosity can be brought out by using like an S curve and then kind of slowly playing around with it. And this is something that you just got to get a feel for as you play with PixInsight. You can also short of messing with RGB, there are other channels within here. There's the luminance channel as well as the saturation channel. I like to play around with the saturation channel a little bit. If you click on the S instead of the RGB on the right-hand side and then drag that up a little bit, you'll see all the reds get a little bit deeper. You can apply that or reset it, whatever you like to do. So go ahead and do that, apply it, reset it, whatever you like. I'm in fact going to try to get the core to come out a little more. So I am going to select RGB, and then I'm actually going to, from the very top, I am going to drag down a dot, and then I'm going to try to even the line back out to where it was originally. And then that should bring my core out a little bit more. And indeed it. So this is something, like I say, you kind of get a feel for it the more you play it. And over time you will too. It's just one of those things that you got to mess with. So hopefully you'll play with it more and more, and over time you'll get used to it. So that's the curves tool in a nutshell. Very, very important tool. The easy soft stretch is an awesome tool for beginners, and it works very well for what it is. But it is not the end all be all for nebulosity transformation. And you do need to learn how to process photos, and manipulate nebulosity and colors and extract channels, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to get too deep on it because we could literally sit here all day talking about all the different stuff that you could do in PixInsight, but that is kind of a rough overview of how you do it. So after you've finished manipulating what you want to in the curves tool, again, you can press the square button to apply any changes that you've made. You will see that your nebulosity has been changed on your original starless image. And then obviously what we would want to do is put our stars back in. And actually, before I put the stars back in, I am going to do what I said I might do earlier. I'm going to open up that star mask, and then I am going to open up the curves transformation tool, and I'm going to click on the real-time preview. And instead of the RGB channel, I'm going to click on the S for saturation. And then I'm going to click right in the middle of that line, and I'm going to drag it up just a little bit. And I'll notice some of the stars get a little bit deeper in color. And then I'll hit apply, give it a sec. And then I'm going to look, and I'm going to see that they do indeed look a little bit more colorful. And then I might do one more little stretch and apply. And that looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. So I just did 2 little stretches and applied that, and that's good enough for me. So I'm happy with that. Like I say, I do like to apply a little bit more saturation to my stars just because it makes them pop a little bit more, especially with a picture like this, because it's such a wide field. I really want the stars to shine as much as they can, given that there's so many of them and they're going to be very small when we're done with this image. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is actually recombine the two images. So we need to put the star mask and the starless image back together. And the tool that we use to do this is called Pixel Math. And essentially, we are using a very, very simple expression to put these back together. There are more complex ways that you can absolutely use to combine starless and star images back together. I am still using the original, very simple way that I learned how to do it a long time ago, and it works fine for me. If anyone listening knows a fancier way to do it that works better, feel free to email me. My email is ruastrocast@gmail.com. But in order to do that, you're just going to go ahead and click on Process up top, and then select all processes, and you're going to scroll down until you find Pixel Math and select that. And what we're doing here is we're essentially setting up the equivalent of a math equation. So try to think of it, Pixel Math, right? It's a math equation. So we're essentially adding two things together to get a result. And the variables that we are adding together in this case are the names of the two images. It is case sensitive. So if you have capital letters or lowercase letters, you need to indicate that in Pixel Math. Now, the first one, the starless image, should be called starless with a capital S. Depending on, what your particular scenario is, if you've made copies of files while we were talking, it could be called Starless 1. You may have renamed it something else, and that's perfectly fine if you did. I'm going to assume that it's called Starless, but just look at the top of your image right beside, where it says RGB. It should show the name of your image. And in my case, it's actually Starless 1, but yours should be Starless. And your other image should be star_mask. And it might, again, be called something else. But if you use Starnet 2 to process the image, then it should be called star_mask. But if you've renamed it something, that's perfectly fine. So in this case, what we want to do, we need to keep in mind that the order in which we add these two is very important, because if we add if we do starless first and then star mask, we're not going to end up with all of the nebulosity tweaks that we did on the starless version. So what we want to actually do in Pixel Math for the equation is do star_mask plus starless, and starless in this case has a capital S. So make sure that if yours is capital S that you include that. And then you're going to select the starless image. So let's make sure that we have that one selected. And then you're going to press F5 or click on the square button. And it shouldn't take but a moment. And then you should see the stars appear on your starless image. If for some reason they appear on the star mask image, then you may have done it backwards and you may need to undo that. That's perfectly fine. If that happened, just right click on your star mask image and click undo Pixel Math. And then what I want you to do is just reverse that equation and do starless plus star mask instead. But you should be perfectly fine doing star_mask plus starless. Select the starless picture and then click apply. And then it should add the star mask to the starless picture. So the last thing we're going to touch on is star reduction. There is an excellent tool that is made by two guys named Mike and Bill. Bill Blanchon, and I don't know Mike's last name. I'm very sorry, Mike, but shout out to you and shout out to Bill. They have made a awesome star reduction tool that is freely available, and I am going to link to that in the show notes as well. It's a very, very easy install. All you need to do is add it to your repositories, just like we did earlier today, and it will have you install an update. And once you do that, it'll restart PixInsight. So just save your project where you are, and then it'll ask you to install the update, yada, yada, yada. And PixInsight will come back up, and then you can go into Script Toolbox and you will find Star Reduction. And this is an awesome tool because what you can do is it'll have target view, and that's going to be your main image. And then you'll select starless view. So that's going to be our starless picture from earlier. Just go ahead and click the drop down and select the starless image that we generated earlier. And it will actually show you a preview of the starless image. And when I say starless, it's actually a star reduction image that we're looking to do. And you can change it by the iterations, which is what you'll see down below on the third box. And it starts with 1 by default. On this particular image, I am really liking the way that number 3 is looking. I'm kind of flipping back and forth between 2 and 3. Yeah, I'm really liking the way 2 is looking. So I think I'm going to go with iteration number 2, just because I think it gives it the best look. So definitely install Star Reduction because it's an amazing tool and everybody should have access to this. Star Reduction is something that I do in pretty much all of my images. It lets you get those pinpoint beautiful stars in all of your images. I do not like fully removing stars from any of my images just because I feel like it's not space if you do that. Why even have a picture of space if you're gonna, remove all the stars? It just doesn't seem right to me. But reducing the stars, I don't have a problem with that at all. In fact, I think that it can, dramatically add to your photo if you do that. So the star reduction tool is an awesome, awesome thing to use. Again, I am going to do iteration number 2 with this particular image. And then you can just go ahead and click on the check mark to apply that. And you'll notice that our stars are going to be reduced in size. And just the overall image is going to appear a lot prettier. Excuse me. After that is done, we're almost at the finish line. The last thing that we really need to do on this image to be done with it is noise reduction. So we have a few different options for noise reduction in PixInsight. So in the past, I've used lots of different noise reduction tools, including Topaz Denoise, which is an external denoising tool that I used back when I was before Lightroom came out with their AI denoising tool. Topaz was pretty much my favorite denoising tool that I would use all the time. So when I finished up doing all of my processing in PixInsight, I would pretty much export the photo, open it up in Topaz, denoise it there, and then send it off to Lightroom for final touch-ups and then be done. Luckily, we actually have built-in tools in PixInsight that do a very good job of denoising the photos. Now, that being said, I will say that I have been testing the new Graxpert tool for denoising. Graxpert actually includes a free denoising tool, which is super cool of them to do because, to my knowledge, I believe that's the first free denoising tool to be included by anyone. So huge props to them for doing that. But I will say, I don't think it holds a candle to Noise Exterminator. I think it's night and day. I've ran the test on 3 different images so far. They haven't all been super wide field. I've done it on some of my 80 millimeter refractor shots as well. So more like a 450 millimeter focal view, much more zoomed in than this image that we're working on. And as well as these wide field views. And unfortunately, the noise, it's really not even close as far as how much noise is there between the two. Now, with that being said, the best way to eliminate noise in an astrophotography photo is to gather as much data as possible. If you get plenty of data, you won't have a noisy image to begin with. I think we're all guilty of this at some point. When I first got into astrophotography, I would target hop. I wouldn't even spend an hour on one target. I'd do 45 minutes here, 30 minutes there, 45 minutes there. That's perfectly fine. If you're just getting started, obviously you're going to want to see lots of stuff, and you're going to want to, jump from nebula to nebula because you want to see stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But when you do get to the point where you're wanting to, come up with the highest quality photo that you can, I would strongly encourage you to spend as much time as you can on each individual target. I would say, a minimum of 4 hours on a target from, relatively dark skies would be your best bet. And this is all going to depend on things like how fast is your telescope or the camera lens that you're using. If I'm using my f2 lens, that's going to be able to gather data, 4 times faster than my f5.6 lens. It might even be faster than that. I'm not going to do the math in my head right now, though, because it's getting kind of late. But my point being, though, is there is no substitute for data, and there never will be. But with that being said, we all use denoising tools, and the best one that I have found by far is Noise Exterminator. So if you're going to use a denoising tool, Graxpert is awesome for offering one up for free. But if you're not happy with the results, there is a paid version available through Noise Exterminator. And I believe they also offer a free trial of that, just like they do with all of their tools. So feel free to download and install that and give it a free try. We're going to go ahead and give that a go on this image right now. And all you need to do is open up from the top. You're going to go to Script, Toolbox, and then scroll down to Graxpert Denoise, and you just need to click on it, and then it's going to start running the process in the background, and we'll give it a moment to do its thing. So I actually just ran Noise Exterminator on this one, and man, it's a good tool. I got to tell you guys, if you're going to spend money on any plugins, Blur Exterminator is still my first recommendation. But Noise Exterminator is a very close second as far as recommendations go. It is a phenomenal tool for removing noise. It just does a great job with cleaning it up. And you can zoom way in and it's damn near perfect when you scroll in and look at it. I'll show you the results. I'm going to post the image that I worked alongside you guys in the show notes so you can have a look at it. It's not my best piece of work ever, mind you. This was, I think it was like 40, 60-second images or something like that I took at the observatory when it was already pretty close to the horizon. So not like the best work I've ever done, but a pretty good example for a beginner workflow, I would say. So with the noise removal done, that pretty much takes us through the end of the process. So there's still a lot of other things that you can do in PixInsight. What I have gone over with you guys these last 2 weeks is really just a baseline introduction to PixInsight. So this gets you, basically from, taking your data, stacking it into an image, and then processing it into what I would consider to be, a decent starting point. You can mask off areas so you can bring out more nebulosity. Like, for example, if I had a lot more data for this particular target and I had shorter exposures, like if I had 10-second and 3-second exposures for the core of M42, the Orion Nebula here, I would more than likely do like an HDR composite so I could bring out the core of the nebula a lot better, so it wouldn't be so blown out. So you'd be able to see that core and really get in there with the I can never remember the name. I say triangulum, but that's the galaxy. The trapezium core of the Orion Nebula. And then you could also mask off the gases that are on the outside of the Horsehead and the Orion Nebula and bring those out a little bit more. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do. And PixInsight really has just so many tools and features. Like I say, we could talk for weeks about it and not cover them all. It's what NASA uses. I mean, I guess that pretty much says it all. So I really appreciate you guys coming along for the ride. I hope there's been at least a couple of people that I was able to help learn the basics of PixInsight. If you have any questions about any of this workflow, please feel free to shoot me an email. It's ruastrocast@gmail.com. If I was able to help you and you want to support the show, please feel free to visit our Patreon. That is patreon.com/Astrocast. I'll have that in the show notes as well. I think it's /the Astrocast actually. Shout out to our Patreon subscriber, Carrie. Always got to give a shout out to her. We also have a new $1 subscription level as well. This week for our recommendation, I'm going to reach way back in my bag of tricks to a book that I originally read years and years ago, and it is one of my absolute favorites. If you get a chance to pick up the coffee table version of this, I would highly recommend it because it actually has a lot of really great illustrations in it, if you can find that version. And the book is called A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. There is also an excellent version of it on Audible if you prefer to listen to your books like I often do. I actually own both the coffee table version and the Audible version. That's how much I like this book. So I would highly encourage anyone who has not seen, heard, or checked it out to definitely do that. It's an awesome book that quite literally goes through the history of everything, as the name implies. So if you like the history of the universe and everything that's in it, it's an awesome, awesome book to check out. So this episode is running quite long, as I kind of figured it would, since we're wrapping up the PixInsight Part 2 week. Next week, we are going to get back to our regular episodes, and we'll probably get back to some regular astronomy topics. But I'm so happy that we were able to do this. I had a lot of fun making these 2 episodes and doing the research on them and getting everything together. And I really hope that you guys enjoyed them. Please let me know if you did. Email me, ruastrocast@gmail.com. If it was able to help you at all, I would love to hear back from you, just in case we want to do more episodes like this in the future. I'd love to hear back from any of you listeners. We passed some really important milestones with the podcast recently. Our listenership, I suppose you could say, has increased, which is awesome. We've got more listeners than ever. So keep them coming, guys. It's awesome. Our family is growing. We've only been here for about 3 months, and it just continues to grow. So I'm greatly humbled, and I'm going to keep making these as long as you guys keep listening. So thank you so much. I hope that you enjoy some clear skies in the very near future. Get your gear out, get under the stars, check out some nebula. The Milky Way is starting to rise around midnight in the northern hemisphere, so we got that to look forward to as well. So enjoy that, and we'll talk next week. Clear skies.